conflict is actually a source of energy. So if we're able to really use conflict and allow it to be a part of life-changing experiences, then that's where we can really offer new opportunities of growth, etc., through these life-changing events. Some of the things I'm just going to quickly go through that we've learned is asking yourself, does conflict evoke fear in you? Now that's really interesting, because oftentimes the reason why we avoid doing certain things or being involved in certain groups and certain activities is because we don't have this fear base that rises up. We kind of talked about this where we just have these types of fear base, like if it's public speaking, if it's making these announcements or raising your hand in class, we avoid it. We look at it as a form of possible conflict. Another thing is to ask yourself, are you overly agreeable? When you're in a group dynamic, do you just go along to get along to go along, in order not to rock the boat at all? Just being overly agreeable. Oftentimes that can leave us somewhat frustrated, to say the least. We disengage, as the two speakers also mentioned. Once we disengage, we're really not contributing at all to the group and the group dynamics. We must learn to have tough conversations, and through this course, I think you've learned some ways of dealing with the situation and having these uncomfortable conversations. It takes skill. Also, we need to ask ourselves, how do you really define conflict? And what is and how do you define this cohesion? Do we really want to solve the problems? We have to really dig deep in this. We also learned about this new term of surfacing conflict and learning how to deal with it. The one way of getting real deep with who we are as individuals is learning to deal with our fear and learning to deal with ways of overcoming our fears. And usually it's by admitting it. Oftentimes we have to go back in our own personal self, in our personal history, and find out if there has been any type of trauma that has caused us to retreat or not be our true self. They talked about this trauma having to do with areas of our personal life that we often bring into our work environment, and it tends to cause us to be a little apprehensive about how we approach things. I like the idea that was mentioned about in business, we have to realize that these are some true things that take place in groups. We have to acknowledge the true vision of the group, make sure that we know what the vision is. We know that we have a lot of smart people involved in our teams. Oftentimes we usually think we are either smarter than everyone else or we aren't as smart as everyone else. And so we have to come to terms with finding out who's in the room, as we've done throughout the semester, in learning about what our traits are and what our responsibilities are to ourselves and to others, and what do we bring to the team. We have to realize that we all truly have an opinion. Most of us sit on our opinions throughout the journey of the team building, etc. But we have to realize that we need space to share our opinions and to become vulnerable. Yeah, those two key things, vulnerability and curiosity. We need to use this in order to address conflict. So some of the areas in being vulnerable have to do with having this willingness to share our strengths and our weaknesses, and maybe coming up with a plan to overcome them. Maybe getting in an accountability group, or within our team, someone to help us stay and remain accountable. We need to learn to self-manage, and we need to allow ourselves to continue to be creative. These are those areas of being vulnerable and starting this, establishing this strategy. The area of curiosity that was mentioned is we need to make sure that we eliminate judgment. Wow, that's a hard one. To eliminate judgment is kind of sometimes putting aside our own thoughts, our values, and maybe some of the traditions, and being open to hear what other people might have in their opinion. Wow. Own our own judgment, but also consider your way, of course, holding on to your own values, but then also allowing yourself to become interested in what other people have to say. So we can use these as far as strategies in our overcoming conflict. So with that being said, now I'd like to have us go into our individual groups, and part of the assignment that you'll be working on throughout the next 7 weeks. Can you believe this is week 7, of course? But we need to come to an agreement on your project and what you want to look into resolving and working. At the very beginning of our class, within the first 3 weeks, we came up with some ideas of what some of the areas of conflict that might be out there on a larger scale. But now I'd like to have you and your team in your CLC group to come up with 2 or 3 plans that you would like to address, and kind of do some research on discovering and coming up with a plan to have a resolution. So what we're going to do, I'm going to put you into your breakout rooms, and okay, so now it's really official. All right, and so what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes, and I want you to come up with a plan. Last Wednesday we talked about a few plans having to do with global type of issues. We talked about community issues, small group issues. And so within this, I would like for you guys to come up with a project that you would like to solve that has to do with something that is in our, in our news today, and see how you might be able to resolve that. And let's just talk about it. You have the worksheet in your assignment that I did send today to you. So I want you to talk it through a little bit, and then we're going to come back and have a little bit more of a plan. So as I said, let's take about 10 minutes, and I'll give you a little heads up on when I'm going to come back, bring everyone back together. And let's talk about what you guys want to work at as a project, team project. Okay, here we go. Any questions before you separate into your teams? Okay, here we go, guys.